Welcome to Macroeconomics. This is a lecture on Chapter 1, where we'll be trying to cover some of the importance of economics, looking at a little bit of the difference between micro and macro. I know some of you will have taken micro, some of you may not have, and that's okay. We'll talk a little bit about how economists use theories and models to understand economic issues. And then we'll talk about three types of economies while realizing that in the most countries are a blend or a mixed economy of the last couple. So one of the key things I think is important to understand is that economics has real impact on real lives. It's about decision-making fundamentally, and decision-making, understanding that there are many times are scarce or limited resources, and trying to make the best choices we can with those. And if we make good choices, they really help people. But if we make poor choices, they can lead to devastating consequences in the lives of individuals and countries. Adam Smith is one of the founders of modern day economics and spoke a lot about the division of labor, and that when we divide up the work that we do and specialize in certain areas, then we can allow more to be produced and for economic growth. If you think about human history, much of our history, most of us would have been farmers and involved in agriculture. And it's through the division of labor that we can have fewer people in farming and other people doing a wide variety of things. And it explains why we have large corporations now that have hundreds of thousands to even millions of employees, and that we divide the work up because collaboratively we can do more when we specialize. So micro and macro have a lot of similarity, especially in the first 5 topics that we'll cover. Both micro and macroeconomics study resource scarcity and the ideas of opportunity costs. When you pick one thing, you inevitably choose not to do a number of other things with your time, with your talents, with your finances. Micro is generally seen as the foundation upon which you build macroeconomics, but I will tell you that as an economics major, I studied macro prior to micro. And so whichever one you learn first will be a good building block for the second. And there's a need for you to understand how supply and demand work, so we will spend some time talking about that in the first 5 chapters and visit it again and again during our semester together. Micro is often seen as more concrete, macro more abstract. What I would say is micro, you can see the direct impact on you personally a little more concretely, the prices you pay, the wage that you earn, the impact on the company you're at or own, where macro is trying to aggregate or sum together, pull together all of the economy. So all households, all individuals, all companies. And so it has an impact on your life. It's just a little more indirect. And so sometimes it's harder to see that connection. So I'll try to unpack some of that. The idea is that micro means small and studies mostly households and businesses. And you can kind of read through some of the things looked at on this slide. But macro then means large. It's the study of how all decisions made by, again, all households, all businesses create a national economy. Usually we're talking at a national level. Sometimes we even look at a worldwide or a regional level, that it might include multiple countries. So we could look at the continent of Africa as opposed to the country of South Africa or Ethiopia. And I would say that the economy is more than just the sum of its parts. That's an idea brought out in the concept of synergy. But if you think of a human body, if it was just a bunch of parts randomly put together, it sure wouldn't seem very functional like our bodies are. And so it's important to think about how the pieces fit together. And we'll cover topics like inflation, unemployment, economic growth. One of the founders of economic theory is John Maynard Keynes, and his theories we'll look at in a couple of chapters midway to second half of the semester and see what implications they have. But it's not the only way of thinking about macroeconomics. In economics, we often use theories that are based on assumptions and human behavior, things we can observe, see, test, and try to make the most sense out of them. I tend to think of theories as stories put together what I know to be true to try and make a whole out of them. And so the point of the theory is to take a complex issue and simplify it and to explain to the best of our current understanding why things are the way they are, or why things work the way they do. A simple example of this is if you think of households and firms and you were to follow the arrows. If we look at the firm side, firms pay wages, salaries, and benefits, that first lower arrow going back to households. And in return, those households then offer labor and services. We'll work for you, you'll pay us wages, salaries, and benefits. So we'll work for you and you'll pay us wages, salaries, and benefits. The second one, we'll just start on the household side. We make payments for goods and services, haircuts, new cell phones, cell phone service, and those goods and services then continue to be provided by the firm. And then we make payments for those goods and services and they continue to provide those goods and services. So when you see a diagram, when you see a graph, it's just trying to explain a theory, a story, simplify something that's probably more complex in the world, but to help us understand and be able to talk and dialogue about it. So there are three kind of broad strokes of economies: traditional economies, which don't exist much anymore; command economies, which there's fewer of; market economies, which in their purest form really don't exist; and then most economies are some mix. They're somewhere along the continuum between command and market. So if you wanted to look at a traditional economy, you could go back to ancient Egypt as an example, but again, it's hard to find fully traditional, where there's strong religious impact into politics. It can feel a bit traditional, but that kind of economy is virtually non-existent on the earth today. So, if we were thinking about capitalism and markets, often we can think of something like the New York Stock Exchange, good kind of overall just picture of what capitalism looks like. And I'll tell you, I am a firm supporter of capitalism, but I also believe capitalism needs to be matched with strong ethics and morality so that we distribute the success more evenly. And capitalism may not be perfect, but it seems to be the best option that we have if mixed with a true sense of what is right and wrong, and a government that is engaged in how to distribute the wealth that's created. So in here, we're going to talk a lot about trade between countries, and it's key that goods and services can transport back and forth. And there's really three factors we'll spend a lot of time thinking about: goods and services, which we want to be able to move between countries to grow the whole world's economic pie, if you will. But also we recognize that currencies, because we don't all share the same currency, have to be able to move across national borders. And then we'll talk about an issue that's a little harder, and that's people being able to move to where work is, to bring their time, their talents where they can best utilize them. And that has impacts on immigration, migration, and the ability of labor to move, which is probably the least talked about and the least free in movement around the world today. So what you're going to be doing is you're actually going to do a short assignment probably every time that we cover a chapter. It should be the last slide that I talk about, but also these are available in part, at least, on our online Barnes and Noble education site, LoudCloud, where you'll be reading your texts, doing your quizzes and things. And this exercise or activity, what I'm asking you to do is thinking about from purely competitive market economies to communist or very planned economies. I want you to mark different countries along that spectrum. If we were to put Hong Kong, especially prior to this year where there was some pressures put in place by mainland China, it is probably even further left than the United States in terms of capitalist free market. North Korea might be one of the extreme cases towards the far right on this lower level here. And what I want you to do is take a little time and just place these countries. Singapore, the United States is on there, but Venezuela, South Korea, France, South Africa, Chile, and Norway, where you think they might be. And if you want to do a little research to have a little bit better understanding, great. But based on your understanding of the world, where you might place them right now. All right, I'll look forward to seeing how you do that. And thanks for listening in to our first lecture.